Hey everybody, it's Derek here. Thanks as always for stopping by. So I realized there was a book back in January that I had read and I completely forgot to review it. And worst of all, it's a book on Palestine. I mean, what's wrong with me? I take every opportunity I can to talk about Palestine. So let's get right into it. All right, guys, so today I wanted to talk about a very short book. In fact, all I had was the e-reader for it. It's called Except For Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics. It was written by Marc Lamont Hill and co-authored with Mitchell Plitnick. It's about 230 pages, just after the endnotes, so I think the actual body of the text is just under 200 pages, so not a very big read at all. But what a great book. It talks about, I think his main argument is, that is Marc Lamont Hill's main argument, is for the left in the West to extend their support for LGBTQ rights and for minorities and opposing so many of the really fascist tendencies on the right, to extend all of that to this to the Palestinians, because as you know, especially in the United States and even here in Canada, the support for Israel has been unwavering, definitely in the United States, although the distinction between the US and Canada is very small on that issue. And the reasons for that are clear. I mean, we know what happened with the Holocaust and the political activism that took place of the Israeli lobby and so on, is responsible for why there is a particular sensitivity towards anything that's perceived as anti-Semitism. I'm not going to address the whole oxymoronic idea of calling people who are critical of Israel being anti-Semites because Palestinians are Semites. But all of that, I could go on for about half an hour about that particular critique, which has grown very weary and irritating for the likes of us Palestinian supporters. Anyway, so tabling that, the whole concept behind the book is for the left to really be consistent, because as you know, in the United States, it's both parties that support Israel overwhelmingly. He argues it quite well, especially that side of it, the side that I would like to add, and the main reason why the left, especially in the United States, fails in this regard is, while the left is definitely known for their anti-imperialism and anti-colonial position, where they have a hard time drawing that, especially with the Palestine question, is because the left, as you know, is overwhelmingly, and in fact I would say to the point of being explicit now, they are opposed to the religious right, because it is generally the religious fundamental positions that drive much of the problems that we see on the right. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them. The left is in direct opposition to that. I count myself largely among that. I'm not against religion in itself, but yeah, I mean, there are many things worth opposing on the right where it's driven by religious intolerance and that sort of thing. So the left is weary, I would say, while they are coming around to supporting Palestinians overall, certainly in their anti-imperial rhetoric, which has remained consistent since, before the Vietnam War, really. It's kind of difficult because, at first appearance, it's like, why are we supporting, this Muslim majority group? That is, again, according to the media, according to the way Israel wants everybody to understand Arabs in that region, they're so intolerant, they're jihadist, they're violent, they're all these terrible things, and they want to inflict Sharia on the rest of the world. This is the racist slogans that are bandied about with impunity. And so the left doesn't want anything to do with that. In fact, I've seen so many memes where those on the left that do support Palestine, especially the LGBTQ in support of Palestine, they're ridiculed because it's like, oh, come on. You don't know how the Muslims view homosexuals. You don't know how the Muslims view those who deviate from the gender binary and all those sort of topics, right? And so you can understand why the left, especially here in Canada and the United States, is so opposed, and it's a kind of a hard sell, right? But the problem is, and I'm talking about this because I think that Marc Lamont Hill could have captured this a little better, although he did a remarkable job. He could have captured a little better that reality, that this is why the left doesn't back Palestine. And it's not defensible, because what you're seeing there in these sort of Muslim tropes or unflattering stereotypes is exactly what we saw in the Black experience throughout slavery and Jim Crow. And even to this day, there's many unflattering stereotypes that hang on because this is the response that you get. I'm speaking of like the idea of violence and jihad. As you know, when groups are marginalized, especially nationalities, countries, when they're feeling a constant aggression against their borders, say, or a threat to their very existence, we're not going to be having discussions about the LGBTQ. I'm sorry. We're not going to be having discussions about, well, maybe women should be more involved in the economy and in the halls of power and so on. No, those conversations are for when we get peace and general economic prosperity. During wartime, and this applies even to the West, who is, supposedly invented human rights and all this bullshit. What happened during World War II? What happened during World War I? What happened through big crisis points, especially when there was an aggressor? You go into a politics of austerity. That is, you're focused on survival, man. And anybody who opposes the narrative, anybody who wants to challenge the status quo, there's no room for you. Get the hell out. And so that's why it is, especially in many Arab lands, not just Palestine. I'd say Palestine is actually one of the better ones in that regard. But yes, throughout the Muslim majority Arab world, you do see these sort of Sharia precepts, and it looks like that's what the religion is. And it's not. It's not. There are many people who subscribe to the Islamic faith, and there's many sects within Islam that don't espouse those intolerant views, So this is what people are pointing at, especially here in the West in the post 9/11, racist era of anti-Arabism and anti-Islam. What they're referring to is not Islam in itself. What they're referring to is a politics of austerity. Why the left needs to extend their progressive propensities to Palestinians is not just based on the facts of it, that you've got this indigenous group that has been attacked and attacked and attacked, and the moment that they resist, the moment that they defend themselves, it's terrorism. Why the left needs to extend their progressive politics to the Palestinians is because we can't have a discussion about human rights in a context where genocide is happening. We can't have a rational debate about the role of women in the economy, about accepting marginal groups. We can't talk about that. And besides, when you actually go to the West Bank and Gaza, most people are afraid of who? Not Palestinians, not Arabs. They're afraid of Israel. So that's the facts on the ground. And we just can't have a rational dispute about progressive politics in the context of an imperial colonial regime threatening the very survival of this indigenous group. I wish that Marc Lamont Hill, if I had to challenge him on anything, not so much challenge him, but if I had to kind of take away from his book a bit here, that's where he could have expanded a little more on. But he did argue very well. Well, I'll just read you in the flap, basically. I'm reading this as off of Goodreads. But he says, Except for Palestine definitely argues that progressives and liberals who oppose regressive policies on immigration, racial justice, gender equality, LGBTQ rights, and other issues must extend these core principles to the oppression of Palestinians. In doing so, the authors take seriously the political concerns and well-being of both Israelis and Palestinians, demonstrating the extent to which U.S. policy has made peace harder to attain. They also unravel the conflation of advocacy for Palestinian rights with anti-Semitism and hatred of Israel. So we're not, by being pro-Palestine, you're not against Israel. And he argues that very deftly as well. That by being on the side of Palestinians, you are espousing the existence of Israel. Yes, Israel wants to make this about Hamas and how, Palestine voted Hamas in, and is, they want death to Israel. And that's not the case. Palestinians have time and time again affirmed the existence of Israel and Jews, in particular Jews. You go to any rally that I've ever been to, pro-Palestine, and Jews are rock stars in those ranks, trust me. Anybody who levels anti-Semitism against those who are pro-Palestinian simply have no clue what's going on the ground. And actually, they are as tight can be with Jews. So that argument is just complete nonsense, in my opinion. If you're for Palestine, you're for coexistence. But Israel is the single party in this conflict that is holding up peace, that isn't living up to its end of the bargain, that breaks 99.9% of all of the ceasefires, that is continually aggressive to Arabs generally, even their citizens, with over 65 laws that are anti-Arab at heart, but also in the occupied territories. It's an utterly totalitarian, dystopian regime that Palestinians live under. So, but if Israel removed their settlements back to the pre-1967 line, and this has been the official, you could say codified deal that Palestinians want overwhelmingly, at least in the international level, in the international bodies. They just want autonomy, and they want Israel to go back to their pre-1967 lines. So any invocation of the declarations and the constitution of Hamas, which was like 1987 or 83, I can't remember. This is never invoked by Hamas in recent years. And Hamas, with all of their problems, they have been the ones in modern times that have been honoring all the ceasefires. With a few flare-ups after obviously unpublicized aggressions that Israel has made. But anyway, this is a great book, especially because it's so small and it's so poignant and impactful for how few pages there are. So I'd highly recommend it. I rated it 5 stars. I'm not even going to dock Marc Lamont Hill for not perhaps, dealing with that other aspect of progressive politics on the left being applied to Palestine. He touches on it there, but the main contention that I had just briefly was that it's not explained necessarily why that is. And I think the reason is because the left is explicitly against the religious right, and Islam continuously gets heaped into that because, well, they're anti-LGBTQ, they're anti-atheist, they're anti all these things, and it's like there's more to that story. Don't get duped by the polls that keep getting bandied about and are really quite threadbare now of how the Muslim world is against all of these progressive rights. Throughout much of Ottoman history, Muslims have very much defined human rights, and I think people need to give respect where it's due. There's another aspect of this I really liked, and right at the outset, because that charge of anti-Semitism is thrown about so cavalierly against people in our ranks, he nips that in the bud and says exactly what I'm thinking, and that is, we affirm the existence of Jews. I have been inspired by the history of Jews, not just through the Holocaust, although especially through the Holocaust and seeing their strength. But he really narrows in on that what happened after the Holocaust with the mass migration into the Levant, and then the subsequent partition in 1947 by the UN, and Israel declaring statehood in 1948. Yes, that matters. I hate it when people, especially the Israeli propagandists, try to make this all about Jews and Arabs, because it's not about Jews and Arabs fundamentally. This is about an indigenous group being constantly persecuted and genocided. But it is important to have that historical insight that yes, the mass migration following the Holocaust does matter. It is an important part of this conversation. It has nothing to do with Jews and Arabs, but it does have to do with the fact that the Jews had to go somewhere. And even though other places in Africa were even thought about or pitched at one time or another, of course they chose the Levant. And you know, the Muslim population there, the Arab population, was overwhelmingly receptive of that and wanted to help in a big way, and did help in a big way. But all of this is morphed into, you know, well, Hitler had the right idea and we should have listened, and all of that bullshit, which Palestinians in their statistical majority simply do not espouse that. The whole thing here is let's respect each other's boundaries and let's coexist. But you can't do that in the context of occupation and apartheid. You just can't. And you certainly can't say that in view of the segregated society that Israel has created with Arabs and Palestinian descendants being completely sidelined and segregated, not just economically, but physically they're segregated. It makes Jim Crow in many ways look like a student film. Not quite. I mean, Jim Crow was horrible, but you know, there are aspects. For example, I'm speaking of the vertical partition that exists in Hebron. That takes an evil kind of genius. It's utterly dystopian what Arab Israelis have to live under. I'm going to leave it there for today because I could talk for hours about this topic. If you're interested in this topic, it's not really a primer, this book. It doesn't go into the history so much, but definitely focuses on that question of why the progressive left needs to really extend all of their values that they are so adamant about, and rightly so, to the Palestinian cause. With that, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you want more like the one you just watched, click the suggested video on this screen. Make sure you subscribe, and to connect with me on my other platforms, my handles are linked below in the description, alright? Take care, peeps. Till next time.